What makes most women start a business? Is it passion, money, or freedom? Welcome to the Female Founders, the podcast that takes you behind the scene with women who are founders and CEOs to help you start and scale a successful business of your own. I am your host, Nagilia de Ravin. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Female Founders. Today I'm joined by Hardy Heath, the president and CEO of Heart of America. Jill is all heart and purpose. She helps transform schools across the country into places where students actually want to be. You are going to love hearing her story and how her work is changing lives. Good morning, Jill. Thank you so much for giving me that opportunity to have this conversation with you and to learn more about Heart of America. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me this morning, Nagilia. It is an honor to be here and talk about Heart of America and the important work we do.
Yes, and I look forward to learning more about you as well. But can you tell us how you first got involved with Heart of America?
Absolutely. My journey to Heart of America was a pretty direct one, and but an unusual one. I was working at Target in the philanthropy department, community relations, or social responsibility, it's often called, and had dozens and dozens of grantees in the education space. And we created an incredible program with Heart of America called School Library Makeovers. Fast forward to the program, it scaled across the country, and we were able to transform over 200 school library spaces from floor to ceiling, new furniture, new fixtures, thousands of new books, great decor, fun, vibrant spaces, technology, and working with them to develop this program, Heart of America, I realized very quickly was an organization that was truly best in class.
So pretty much you end up eventually you left Target and start working with Heart of America.
Yes, you're correct. So in my tenure at Target, I focused on education, but also had a portfolio at the end of my career with them on emergency management, law enforcement grants, security. And as I was thinking about my next step, I knew that I wanted to get back into the nonprofit space again. Prior to Target, I was in the performing arts and focused in education. And prior to that, in the environmental space, focused on conservation. And so I really loved my time at Target. It gave me so much. I called it a mini MBA, and showed me how to vet nonprofits, to understand and actually be able to find those nonprofits that had a great idea and great portfolio and just needed support and help to scale. But my heart was still in the field, so to speak, and getting my hands dirty. So on the nonprofit level. And while I learned so much being a grantee or a grantor rather, so granting money, I wanted to be back doing the service. So the Heart of America was going through a transition. Their founders decided to retire. And of course, over the course of my tenure at Target, we came to know each other very well. And they asked me to throw my hat in. The funny part was Heart of America is based in DC. And I am speaking to you from the Twin Cities, where my family lives and my husband has his dream job. So they were wanting me to potentially move to DC, but in all searches and interviews, there's an opportunity to show folks how to do things differently. So I shared, if I'm a finalist, I will share how I can lead this organization as a remote president, and it is a national organization that had the great potential of growing. So there was a lot of opportunity to have staff throughout the country.
Ooh, so pretty much from what I understand, you took the organization from being here to pretty much being.
Yes, yes. They were starting to work across the country, and they were growing because they were founded in the what they call the DMV area, so DC, Maryland, and Virginia. They were growing from the east out, and certain sponsors and funders were taking them in different parts of the country. But we knew there was a great opportunity, and the founders did too. They were starting to move across the country and grow across the country. So it was a perfect time for me to step into as president. At Target, I had a chance of working not only with remote teams that were based regionally, but also international teams. So I had experience doing it. And my international teams were China and India at that point. So I had the vision and I certainly knew it could work. We just needed to give it a try. And so fast forward to today, when I started, we were about 11 employees, and now we're 50. And we have three hubs, if you will. The DMV DC area will always be our home, and our main headquarters. But now there's a good contingency of employees here in the Twin Cities, which is one of our communities of impact. And we can talk about that in a little bit. And then also in Salt Lake City, where we do a lot of work with the indigenous populations in this country.
So now let's talk a little bit more about Heart of America. The name itself, don't get me, you say heart and you say of and you put America, meaning you guys are doing something great for America. So can you tell us a bit more about what the organization does and how does it help children and things like that?
Yeah, so Heart of America is an education equity nonprofit. We focus on making sure that every student, no matter where they live, what zip code they're in, has access to high quality, state of the art resources, as well as spaces. And what I mean by spaces is I mentioned the library previously. The library can be the heart and core of a school, but if it's not a vibrant space that has great resources, great design, it's not going to be used as much, and its potential is lost. So we work with corporate and private partners to pull in additional funds to help renovate and make over schools that need some hope and inspiration. There's a lot of our schools across this country that were built in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. That's the majority of the public school infrastructure. And if you think about when those buildings were built, they were built during a time when classrooms had one design. You had teachers up at the front, and then you had rows of desks. You would stumble across at that time a classroom that was maybe a little more innovative and more collaborative, but it wasn't the normal course of teaching. Now, fast forward to today, we need classrooms that are flexible, that are collaborative, that have both tech and traditional resources integrated, whether they're classrooms or libraries or what we call computer science areas. They're much more interactive. And so our country has a huge opportunity to modernize these schools in a way that makes sense for teaching of today, both for the teachers and the students.
But it seems like in your hometown, you kind of like make it like almost like a hub for Heart of America. Is that because of the connection you have with the locals, or can you tell us a bit more about the project that's going on there?
Yeah, so Heart of America has several communities across the country that it has a concentration of not only employees, but also partners. And not that it's just based on partners, it's actually based on school opportunity. So you think about the DMV area, that includes Baltimore. Baltimore is one of the school districts in this country that's the oldest, one of the largest, and has schools that are needing help and renovation. I mean, there are schools that you walk into, and unfortunately, you can't imagine being there for 8 hours. And now those schools are not just in the East Coast, but they're across the country. And this does not reflect the great teachers in those spaces. It's just the environment that they're working in. Here in the Twin Cities, which is Minneapolis and St. Paul, we have schools like that too. It's communities across the country have schools like this, unfortunately. And it's not the fault of the teachers or even the district at times, because there's not enough money right now in education to modernize schools in an equitable way across the country. So we identify the need, which we know is in DC, we know is all over the East Coast, we know is in the Midwest, everything from the Twin Cities to Detroit, to further down in Texas, Ohio, and then even the West Coast, in schools that are rural and also inner city. It doesn't matter where the school is or the district. There's always going to be schools, unfortunately, that are not as well maintained, as others. This is also in part because we fund education through taxes. And if there's not a big tax base and a wealthy tax base, schools get less
Yeah.
inherently. And so, often the schools in struggling communities and rural communities will not be as modern. So, Heart of America works with partners, primarily corporations, foundations, even individual donors, to make sure that, again, no matter where the child is, that child has what they need to make the best possible future for his or her self. And that is where the equity really is challenged in this country. You can go into a school in a well-resourced community and then go into a school in an inner city, let's say Detroit or New York or even LA, and they are night and day difference. We also know that we're products of our environment. So if we're in a school that is very, what I call institutionalized, very like vanilla bean white, not a lot of color inspiration, not modern, ceiling tiles are falling. There are many schools in this country where they've had to cut janitorial services and they're only cleaned daily in the bathrooms and the cafeteria, and that's it. And so these are things that are not acceptable. And Heart of America works with partners in those communities, like the Twin Cities, like San Diego, like San Antonio, any community actually. But we do have hubs across the country to make these schools a better place for teachers and students. And it's just a simple fact that if you love the space you're in, look at my office. I designed it in a certain way. I'm very attracted to science and plants and animals and color. And so this is a happy place for me. And if you don't feel comfortable in your space, you're not going to want to open your mind to the fullest it can be because you're distracted, you're not inspired. So we really need these great spaces for teachers and students.
And I like what you said. And thinking about it when I back in school, you are right. And I remember one time I switched school from an old one to a new one. There was a complete difference between the two. Well, you don't get me wrong. I love Ajini, the guy who used to clean the school, but he was old. He was getting
Yeah.
old, and he's been in that job for over 40 years. So it's not the same as when you go to the new school where they have people, a lot of people around cleaning, the cooking. It's completely different compared to the old school when they give you the food. It's like the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, your experience is a reality for many students and teachers. If you're not teaching in like a vibrant space, and so many teachers end up spending hundreds, even thousands of dollars on their classrooms to make it feel inspiring, something that their students want to be in. And they're spending their own money because there's not enough money in the school district to give each teacher necessarily funds every year to decorate their classroom. So if you are in a space that's not doesn't feel like you're not going to want to spend time in there. Our goal is to create these spaces that teachers don't want to leave and students don't want to leave. And we've seen through surveys and just testimonials that once as it's even can be one space, it can be a innovation lab, it can be that library, it can be a community space or center. Once those spaces are modernized and designed well, that no one, the kids, the students, even the community don't want to leave them. And that says a lot. I mean, especially in today's age, it's hard to get the students even to come to school. Our country has a epidemic across from east to west, north to south on attendance, and we can't get kids to school. If we can't even get them to school, we can't get them to learn. So the goal is getting them to school, getting them to want to stay and be motivated while they're there. There's so many variables today. And so one space and core space within a school that's been modernized, and let's say we work with athletic teams, let's say the Denver Broncos or the Baltimore Ravens, help renovate that school. Those kids feel special. The pride increases in those schools, often open enrollment increases or attendance as well. Often disciplinary acts decrease. And it's because they're motivated and inspired by these spaces. But it's also part of our model is bringing in the sponsor and corporation or athletic team if they'd like to come and volunteer, put the finishing touches on the project, and celebrate with the kids. So it's a whole day celebration and ribbon cutting. Those kids will never forget that day. It's like a holiday for them. And, they may not know that they're actually being read to or sitting next to a very well-known athlete in basketball, soccer, football, but they know there's an adult that's there and caring. And that says a lot, especially in our communities where families struggle. Kids may not be being raised by, their parents. Sometimes they're being raised by an auntie or grandparents. And that is an important combination of family as well. But we as a community, and especially the school community, need to rally around students and families, no matter what their family makeup is, to maximize the children's potential. So having volunteers at the school that day is one of the most special things as well, too.
And not only that, and I see where you guys are coming from. Again, our children, they are the future of us. So education is important. They are the next president, the next doctor you're going to need.
Absolutely.
And it started in a classroom.
It does. And it starts with inspiration, whether it's a caring adult that's a tutor that comes in once a month, or once a week to work with an elementary school child on reading or math. It could be that teacher. It could be a coach. It could be the janitor. We have to build ecosystems of support. And some of the projects we do are so inspiring for the students, but they also allow discovery. And one great example of that is we work with Verizon, and we create what's called Verizon Innovative Learning Labs. They are state-of-the-art labs in middle schools. And these labs are so advanced that they're more advanced than some college labs. They have AR, VR, 3D printing. They have technology that many of us have never experienced. And they're in middle schools. And the reason they chose middle schools is because that's when kids start realizing and dreaming what they can be. And if you're a child that might not even have broadband or connectivity at home, you're not going to be using computers. But if it's at school, then in a Verizon Innovative Lab, you see the world and you start to dream about being things that you had never knew existed. And we don't, and it's like, seeing these kids in an inner city or rural area start dreaming that they can become the next coder, the next tech, innovator, that they can solve problems themselves to help their community. We've had students help to design prosthetics for their classmates that may not have a fully functioning arm. I mean, the stories that are coming out of these spaces are amazing. And again, it's because they have access. They start to believe they can, and we all know they can. But if you aren't exposed to certain things, you never know that you can be it.
Absolutely not. Listening to you talking, it's like you really enjoy what you do. So when you took that position, what was your vision when you become the president?
Yeah,
What was that vision behind it?
thank you for asking. That's a great question, and it's easy and hard to answer, right? It's easy because I knew the organization was the organization I wanted to work in. I love the people, like you said, with the name. It was called Heart of America because how we do our work with heart and head, and with a service mindset, bringing the volunteers in and serving community to be making community better. So there was no question in my mind that this was the right place for me. The Heart of America was much smaller when I took it on. And I knew there was potential. I had seen the potential when I was, a grant maker for them at Target and saw what they could do. And I knew if we could scale it and maybe expand the portfolio, because they did get their start in library makeovers. And I thought, that's one space in the school. If we can renovate more spaces, and maybe we just start with one space because we might not have enough funding from the particular sponsor to do the whole campus. But if we can expand it to different focus areas, then we can start to improve systematically all types of schools and even improve the same school year after year. So what I'm talking about is we now have focus areas in library and literacy, health and wellness, which includes everything from athletic spaces to peace and meditation rooms, mental health suites, organic gardens, teaching kitchens. We also focus on STEM and STEAM. So everything from science labs to the Verizon Innovative Lab I shared a little earlier about, to art classes and podcast rooms. And then we also focus on career and college readiness. We know that not everyone is meant to go to step into higher education, nor they may not want to either. We have a great opportunity in this country to build our trades, to build our service industry in a way that is exciting for others, whether it's culinary or beauty. It can be, like I said, construction trades. It also can be coding. That's where a lot of our tech talent came from, trade schools and or community colleges, not four-year degrees. Now that's shifting a bit, but there's a place for everyone. And so similarly to what I discussed about the middle school, also when you're in high school, you need to have access to what you can be. And that means advanced manufacturing. It means, again, the trades, beauty, culinary. So that the sky's the limit, no matter what
Yeah.
your calling is.
So how does the organizations pick the schools?
Yeah, so that is a great question. We work with schools that are under resourced, and we assess that in many ways, but primarily with where the school is located. So, what are the demographics of the students? We traditionally focus on low income and families living in poverty. And so, if we could start with the school, then we start to improve that experience for them, break down barriers. We also renovate Boys and Girls Club, community centers, public libraries.
Mm.
And the reason, and that's what I'd like to just point out, when I said communities of impact earlier, and I mentioned Twin Cities is one of them, Baltimore is another, San Antonio's one, Navajo Nation's another. We start to look at the ecosystem around the school. So if we could not only improve the school, but then also break down some barriers for the family, then that school really becomes a hub, and it makes access to resources beyond education easier.
Yeah.
So I'm talking food pantries. I'm talking clothing pantries or basic need pantries, sometimes laundry facilities if those are needed. I'm also talking clinics in schools and creating spaces for the community. So when the school day ends, it doesn't mean that school's not being used. It's going to be used for maybe the parent teacher organization, maybe for one of the community meetings. We have schools in Prince George's County right now that are creating their library spaces to become community hubs where they hold even, county meetings. So, and a school could even become a voting place,
Yeah.
right? And so while we need the schools to focus on their core mission, which is education, I think we can do a better job in this country at leveraging the pre-existing ecosystem of the school to break down barriers and make things easier for families.
So what would you say your proudest moment uh, working with HOA?
Oh, there's so many proud moments. And when I think about it, it's almost overwhelming. There could be, there's been moments where um, I'm on site and a student gravitates towards me, and the next thing I know, they're holding my hand and walking with me and around, telling me their story and what they like to do. And those students are so inspiring. They're also students, and I never want to make assumptions, but they could be students that just need those caring adults around them. And so, you take time in that moment, you be present, you look them in the eye, you make sure that you encourage them and let them know we're here because of them. When the kids know that there are volunteers in their school, no matter where they're from, to be honest, they feel so special. So my favorite moments are those unveiling days. And what's unique about Heart of America is, and I want to share this, is that we are a one-stop shop. So we not only determine the funder and then match the funder with the school, or vice versa, match the school with the funder. We do it both ways. But then once that project's decided on, we actually have an in-house design team that designs with the school and understands their vision and what their idea is. And then they bring it to life. They see the plans on paper. Now, granted, we have some schools and students that say, we want a water slide in the library. Well, we can't do that. But can we do something more whimsical? If there's a little kid area, maybe there's a little slide. Who knows? So we try and bring those things to life. We can't do everything, but we know we can inspire them. once that design's set, then we have a procurement team that starts to procure all of the things that go into the space. Because you can design a great space, but if it doesn't have the resources you need to teach and to learn, then it's half done, right? Yeah. And then we have a GC construction team that actually builds and creates the space. And then we get that space to 90%. And that's when we bring the volunteers in to do the final touches, painting a mural, giving kids books and resources to take home. So assembling take-home education bags, even building furniture. And then at the very end of that 4-hour experience, we cut the ribbon. And so often it's just a celebration that I can't even describe. So those are my favorite moments. My other favorite moment was during COVID. And a lot of our students in Indigenous populations are very remote. We have students that actually ride the bus on dirt roads for up to an hour and a half to 2 hours one way. And so if you think about what happened during COVID and schools closed down, that means they don't have access anymore. And so, and a lot of these houses and families we were working with didn't have running water and power in Navajo Nation. About 40% of homes don't have running water and power. That means they can't learn remotely. So we, Heart of America, some amazing partners, Solve Energy, some of the soccer teams across the Four Corner areas, other organizations, everything from museums to an opera company to school districts came together as unlikely partners, and we created almost 15,000 education kits that were flown in because during COVID, the Navajo Nation was shut down. So you could only come in if you were a tribal member. So either driven in with a tribal member or flown in and then distributed to these families, even if they were an hour and a half, 2 hours away, so that the kids would have something. They had STEM kits in there. They had books. They had games to interact with their families. We couldn't solve the energy issue or the broadband issue in that moment, but what we could give them is resources to continue learning while schools were shut down. Now, today, we actually go and power these houses. We've powered over 300 houses with solar systems. And people often ask me, how is that education? It's education because it's a basic resource. And if kids can't, power their Chromebook or connect to the internet and broadband, they can't continue learning once they're out of school and over summer. So I'm very proud of that work too. And that's definitely one of my highlights.
So what advice would you give to women who lead and who want to lead in the nonprofit or corporate world?
Yeah, I would say that if you have the determination and passion, you gotta take a step forward and don't let something that you have never done before make you hesitate. And it's so easy to do. We as women often will scan a job description or opportunity and say, oh, I've only qualified for maybe 65% of it. But if it's a job you want and love, throw your hat in. Men often will scan a job, and if they even get 50%, they're like, oh, I'm applying, I've got this. And women have a different approach. And what I will say is the nonprofit world it requires creativity and innovation and determination. And we all have that just alone from us being female and having to raise families, having to care for our parents. We are the consummate, whether it's good or bad, multitaskers. And that is one of the things that has served me very well. So I can see, you can see where you want to go, and it may take a while to get there. But as long as you keep moving forward, that's the most important advice that I will share. The second is that you've got to try, because if you don't try, then you're self-eliminating and you're not giving yourself even a chance to succeed. And often that happens, I think, across the board and on all levels and all industries and sectors, but particularly the nonprofit sector, because it's a sector that is considered, and I would say it's not accurate necessarily, but considered more unstable, with less resources. And so a lot of times women will say, I can't afford, maybe even literally from a monetary standpoint or an energy and time and talent standpoint, to go into a sector that isn't as well established. And often, unfortunately, our sector, the nonprofit sector, is what people consider a risky sector. But it's one of the most important sectors. We exist because the government and corporations, the private sector, can't figure out how to do this work. And I would love for Heart of America to work itself out of a job. That would mean we would solve education equity in terms of resources and modern learning spaces. That's my goal. Do I think it's ever going to happen? Maybe not in my lifetime, unfortunately, but we've got to try. So
yeah. And you never know. You never know.
You never know. Absolutely.
So what's next for you in Heart of America?
That's a great question. We are in the midst of creating a new strategic long-range plan. I say long-range plan, and I always have to laugh because long-range plans now are like a year to 3 year instead of 5 year. So because our world is changing so much, and in the nonprofit world, a lot is changing in terms of how we're regulated, the funding we're getting from the federal level or lack of funding. So we need to create a plan, and we're doing that. I'm very excited to say that's not only bold, but malleable and can allow us to pivot with the environment we're working on. We know that education equity is such an important issue and topic, but we also know there are a lot of kids out there that are being left behind. And to your point earlier, they're the future. And if we don't educate our future generations in the work that will be stepping into our roles, our country is going to be in a lot of trouble. Yes. I almost feel it's a national security issue. I really do. We've got to do better at educating the masses. We are only as good as our weakest level, and those are the families that struggle. So we've got to figure out how to elevate. So we are putting together a long-range plan and a bold goal that we will be announcing later this year to tackle education inequity in every single corner of this country. We're determined, and that means we're going to need to grow. So we're thinking through what that growth plan looks like, but we're ready and we're needed more than ever before.
I agree with that. And I thank you so much, Jill, for giving me the chance to have this conversation with you and also to learning more about Heart of America. You guys are doing awesome work. I think that helping the next generation is the best way to go. Because at the end of the day, we can't really move forward without them. When we get older, what can we possibly do, really?
Exactly. We're going to be dependent on them. So let's make sure that they're thriving, they're creative, they're problem solvers, they're innovators and collaborators. We need to make sure that we're all working together to make the world a better place.
Thank you for listening to Female Founders Podcast. That's it for this week's episode. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app or connect with us on womel.com so that you don't miss our next episode. See you next time. Bye for now.